Here we go. You know what's going down, right? Like that. Yeah.
I was gonna just kick this off by saying we've given this talk a few times before, and normally we have an hour. This time we have about half as much, so we'll probably be racing through. But I think we have time for a Q&A at the end if we gloss over anything.
No chit chat.
No chit chat, except for this. Okay, so the high level things we always talk about up front are at CD Baby, we've helped more than 1 million artists get their music out there, and we've seen a lot of people do things right, a lot of people do things wrong, and a lot of people just sort of checking the boxes but kind of phoning it in, and the music doesn't go as far as they'd like. So the key to all of this, to releasing music successfully, is prep time, giving yourself enough time to do it right. You spend all this time making the music, and then a lot of people just rush it out the door once the music is finished. So that's the first thing. That is sort of the nature of this conversation.
Yeah. Sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Just basically this whole conversation is about time, and everyone is going to be like, but I just made it and I just want to put it out tomorrow on SoundCloud, and we're going to try and convince you all the reasons why you worked so hard on recording and why you need to work hard on the time in advance of releasing it.
Yeah, and then so the next thing, like, this is going to be probably a big to-do list, lots of things you'll feel like you need to achieve. You're not going to get them all done. Like, just flat out, you'll have 1,000 ideas for your album or your single or whatever you're releasing. Don't beat yourself up if you don't achieve it all. However, if you plan ahead, even if you get half as much done as you'd like, that's better than you'd be if you didn't plan. You're going to have to stay organized. So I know, Cristina, you use this like sticky notes on a wall, right?
Yeah.
There it is.
I'm the queen of sticky notes, but also on a digital realm, now I've become the queen of Trello, even in creative world. I know that's primarily used, in our like business world, but I found that it's an amazing tool because it's basically just a digital sticky board. Making lists, whatever it is that you do to stay organized, just consider the fact that you're going to have to keep coming back to these lists over and over and over and over again. The reason why I've always enjoyed the sticky notes, I actually adopted it from somebody else that showed it to me, but if you just have like a big whiteboard and you have all your sticky notes, and then instead of removing the notes, put big X's on all of the things that you need to get done, from record guitar tracks on all songs to sign up for Spotify editorial playlist date 2 weeks before. If you get to see that board like fully X'd out all the way, you get to see your progress, and that'll just make you feel a lot more, proud and empowered for all the work that you did. So that's one thing. Stay organized, whatever it is that you do and you use for yourself.
Yeah, and the other benefit of like a digital sticky board like Trello or Asana or Monday or whatever you're using is you can assign yourself due dates, so you keep yourself accountable. And the other thing is you can break big projects into lots of small components. So if you were to just wake up tomorrow and say, I need a music video, that's such a huge endeavor that it's just going to be daunting and you won't get to work on it. But if you break it into, come up with a concept, call your friend who has a good camera, the 20 or 40 or 1,000 things that have to happen to make that video, then you can do 1 or 2 of those things a day, and after a month you'll have your video done. So
and you can also add your team members, like maybe bandmates that are willing to help you with some of the promo, or your videographer, photographer, those sorts of things. You can add them to those digital boards. So we're basically an advertisement for Trello, but use it.
The last kind of high level thing I wanted to say is similar to, you're not going to be able to achieve all of the little tactics and stuff that you want to do. You can only achieve so many high level goals too. So I think for every release, it's good to set a number one priority. And that could be just like make your first 100 fans, or collect 20 emails, or, get 1,000 monthly listeners on Spotify or whatever. But you have to know what your number one goal is, because you're not going to achieve it all unless you
set realistic expectations, but also set an exciting goal for yourself. Like maybe this is, you want to sell out 100 of the physical copies of CD or vinyl or tapes or whatever it is that you made. Maybe it's that you want to boost your Spotify numbers by a certain percentage, or like get a certain amount of new Spotify monthly followers. Maybe it's that you want to get on 10 playlists, so make sure that you set realistic goals for yourself, and don't just expect that if you are putting out your first single or maybe your second single in 10 years, that single will necessarily hit Billboard top 40 in 1 week. Like that's a fun goal to like aim for, but then remember that it takes a lot of work to build a career. So what's like the first sort of accessible goal that you can crush? Because once you realize that like those goals are so easy to crush, you're just going to keep working your way to those bigger ones.
Yeah. So the one CD Baby plug I'll do at this point is we have made a tool that'll help you plan for your next release, and you don't have to be a CD Baby client to use it. It's called the Release Plan Generator.
I love it.
If you go to release.cdbaby.com, you plug in your target release date, and then we'll kind of reverse engineer about 45 days for all the sort of crucial things you should be doing to plan for your release.
It's awesome. It'll tell you, let's say your release date is, what day is it today? September 29th. Let's say it's November 20th. It'll be like, okay, well, on September 30th, October 1st, you need to start getting all your distribution assets ready. Do you have cover art? Do you have your audio mastered? And then blah, blah, like it'll go week by week telling you exactly what you need to do, all the way down to make sure that you pitched that Spotify editorial tool, make sure that you've shared it with your fans on release day. So highly recommend using it. It's like an incredible timeline. I not only use it for myself, I use it when helping other artists with like PR so that they're on track. So definitely recommend using the Release Plan Generator. And it's free.
It's totally
free stuff.
Free.
We love free stuff.
So, okay, speaking of that, that Release Plan Generator starts with the assumption that your music is creatively finished. You've got your mixes. Maybe you've mastered it, maybe not. But I think that's like a good jumping off point for our conversation about like all the shit that you have to just get ready and get together. So
no, and it can be really daunting, right? Because you just spent who knows how long doing all the creative stuff, and now you have to like put your brain in a completely different mode, and you have to sort of become your own manager, marketing team, publicist. I mean, for a lot of us that are independent artists, that just happens to be the fact that we wear a million hats, and it can be really exhausting. So I've been there, where I've spent 2 years on a project, recording an album. And by the end of it, I was just like, fudge, I just want to put it out like next month. I'm already over it. Of course, you're like at that point, you're like, I want to write the next thing, or like, I don't even care about this theme anymore. Especially if you're like me and you go really, really double down on the theme. But, you can get to that point, but just remember that literally no one else has heard this yet. This is going to be super fresh to every person on the planet. So you need to do this extra push and this extra work to treat the release as preciously as you treated the recording. The recording was fun. That was your creative outlet for most of us. But then turn this part into a creative outlet as well. Have fun with it. You are an artist by nature. You are already creative. So you can put yourself in the role of a marketer and start thinking about ways that you're going to capture your audience over a period of time. So theoretically, you have this mixed and mastered. Maybe we're going to start thinking about your artwork and how that also relates to the promo photos that'll be released throughout this period of time, or any visual, like any video graphics that you might use to pull your audience in on social media or on Canvas, on Spotify Canvas. Just start thinking about how you want this all to live in a cohesive sort of branding world so that you can, get everybody on board for your vision. And that's something that you want to start early. You want to work to get as much content up front. I hate that word. I say it all the time. I hate the word content. It's so hacky to me, but.
Well, here's one way I get around that though. Like you're talking about the music, the branding, the marketing, essentially all of that is a story. It's a narrative, and it's a story. It's either your story or it's a story you want to tell.
Yes.
And if anything you're doing feels like a super chore or just kind of gross, it's not good marketing, because your marketing should just be an extension of your story. Same thing with branding. So
one thing we've talked about here is people will ask, well, like, when do I start talking about my release? And how? Do you send a message every single day to your Instagram followers that say, my album's coming out on October 12th. My album's coming out on October. No, you don't do that. That's boring. People are going to mute you. They're going to be like, I'm so tired of hearing Chris talk about this and just saying this. It's like he's not doing anything engaging, right? So what are you going to do? You're probably going to start releasing, the first idea that you have a single or an album at least 3, sometimes 4 weeks in advance of that release date, which is why you need all this time up front to make sure that it's signed up, it's distributed, you've got that solid release date ready to go. And then you're going to make sure that all of the information that you're rolling out over that period of time is teasing it, but also engaging people. So Chris, you're really good at this. I've seen you do this for the album that you just did and for singles, but you find really interesting things to use as like promotional material. Like you've done poetry books and stuff like that, which are amazing, but you also, had like information about what was this song about? Like I find that interesting. Information about like different inspiration points or the recording process. And yeah, I think that finding as many different creative things you can to tell the story of the thing that's coming out makes it a lot more exciting when the thing comes out.
I agree. And thank you. And I
Yeah.
think you're amazing at it too. Well,
Thanks.
I want to talk about your video stuff when we get to that. But
Yeah.
real quick, let me just list a bunch of stuff you're going to need about 45 days ahead of putting something out into the world. So you mentioned mix, master, cover art, your social media headers, web redesign, press photos, but also you're going to need to talk to any collaborators you worked with, producers, co-writers, remixers, whoever it is, to make sure that you are listing them the way they want to be listed in the credits and in the metadata, which is just information that accompanies your digital music files. Sometimes those conversations should be had in advance, because sometimes artists are happy to have helped you make the music, but they might not want to be featured as a featured artist or something. So get those conversations out of the way. We mentioned like knowing what your story is. I think that's really the place to start everything, because it's going to inform every other decision you make. So spend a lot of time really digging into what the story of this release is, why anyone should care, defining your audience, who the hell is going to care about this, so that you have a better chance of targeting the right people.
Really quick.
Oh yeah,
sorry.
Go for it.
I was just going to say, one thing that sometimes helps about at 45-day mark is get a group of people together that you really trust, that you think might be interested in sort of hearing this in advance. People that are really good at telling stories or like visual people, and let them listen to it and have a discussion with them and see, okay, what do you think the story is here? And how do you think people will be interested in this? And that'll help you sort of create the blueprint for how you're telling the story. But sometimes we're so deep in it that like we really don't know what it is outside of what we think it is. And then someone else will come to you and be like, you've got like major like train vibes going through this whole album. Like what if you had like a visual representation of like railroad tracks? I don't know why that image just came to mind because it's cheesy, but that's, you never know until you have conversations with other people. So bring a trusted group of people in. Please don't bring 1,000 people in, because you need those 1,000 people to be interested in your song when it comes out, but like maybe 3-4 people, and like listen to it with them. Plus it's super fun to do that.
Yeah, and if those people have writing skills, or like you're saying, they're good storytellers, you can get their help on writing your bio, your press release. And, you're going to want to have a short kind of elevator pitch bio, and then a longer fleshed out one. Video production. Oh, one thing about timeline. When I put out my album last week or 2 weeks ago, to give people context, I had been working with a publicist on that since March. So it came out in September. We had been working for whatever that is, 6 months, crafting the story, planning a succession of singles and the videos that accompany it. And so that one thing could lead to the next in terms of his ability to, pitch to a better place, each success built on. So, for an album, 45 days probably isn't enough. You could be thinking about 6 months out, but just going to throw that out there.
I think I thought up, my album came out in May and I started all that stuff in like October, including photo shoots and video shoots. And even before then I started meeting with somebody who I was like, I really love your your visual your like visual aesthetic, and I'd love it if you could be like the art director on this with me. And that person, it was amazing to bring someone onto the team like that, because like we said, you've done all this work being creative with the audio and with the concept or whatever of your release, that sometimes it's really great to just bring someone else on. You know, I'm creative as a visual person too, and I'd like to be sort of like a co-producer generally of those things, but it's good to trust other people. So again, that was like 6 months in advance.
Well, so that leads to like, I was blown away by your your videos, but just visual branding in general for your release. And so I was hoping we could I could list things, and then maybe you could talk about what you did to make that happen for your release. Like,
yeah. Hannah just said, wow, this is also overwhelming to think about by yourself. It totally is. And that's why it's a good segue. So I did bring somebody on to handle the visual stuff, because I knew that I wanted to make sure that this made a splash, for lack of a better phrase. But
and if anyone doesn't get the pun, your whole theme of your album was bathing.
Yeah, it was. From concept to execution to track listing to audio, everything about it was like supposed to feel like this bathing experience. So I really wanted people to be like submerged in my concept. So I worked with somebody, actually that must have been like 8 months. I can't do math right now, but about 8 months out, and was just like, here's all of the different themes that I'm working with. How can we put this in all of the visual aspects of this album, from the cover art to a music video to visual teasers for each single to the Canvas videos on Spotify, and to anything that I use for social media, and what else? Just the graphic design. I did a vinyl, and so I had somebody do graphic design for the vinyl. So every single thing was cohesive because I brought somebody on board whose entire job was to help me do that. Now, if I didn't have that person, which fortunately it was a homey situation, but if I was doing this all on my own, I could probably get pretty overwhelmed with that, but I probably could handle it. So how do you do that? You write a list of all of the things that you could possibly think might need a picture, a graphic, an icon, anything. And you just start preparing how you're going to get all that stuff up front. So that way on the release day, on, you know, whatever, 45, 6 months, 8 months out, you're not scrambling to put the stuff together. I've definitely found that there was moments where I was like, did I get enough? But I think ultimately I did. And that was because I gave myself a lot of time and a lot of help.
Well, one thing I loved, I loved each of the individual pieces of video that you made, but I also liked how they all worked together and they had completely different approaches. And so what I mean by that is, like, you had a sort of formal music video that was like high production value, good cameras. You can tell there's like a videographer involved. You're in a bath. There's, you know, so that's like a polished. And then you also had a music video that was completely found footage, that was like crappy old VHS. That was all these sort of old retirement age people at the beach or at pools. So it tied in with the water theme, but aesthetically it was completely different. And then you had a teaser video that was literally just like,
oh my God, you bring this up every time.
It was genius. It was ripped from Baywatch. It was just Pamela Anderson with her like red life preserver thing running on the beach with your song playing, and it lasted for 10 seconds. It was hilarious, and it also tied in with the theme. So it's like 3 totally different aesthetics, but it all still felt totally cohesive.
I think part of that comes from working with other collaborators, honestly. Each one of the things that you described was help from other people who were really excited about the theme, and everybody brought their own sort of idea to it. So like with the found footage, that's a friend that makes that. And so he volunteered to make one for this song. Check out Cheat on YouTube. And so anyway, there's always people that are willing to help. I think one of the things, like what you said about feeling overwhelmed, is that often we can feel like it is just all on us to do this, but we forget that we have this like network of people. I know that it can often feel like we don't, especially now when we're not getting to see everybody, or maybe we haven't maybe we haven't played a show in a while, so we haven't like seen people in the real world, but just remember that if you're an artist, there's chances are you probably know other artists or they know other artists. And you can most likely build a little network of people that all want to support each other. So highly recommend it. I think creating as many different options was really helpful. And awesome. Also, some of those things were just sort of created on the fly. Like you mentioned the teaser thing, that was like a last minute idea that was just supposed to be sort of like a joke, and then you've mentioned it several times, so it must have made an impact.
No, it was great. It was awesome. And it works so well as a sort of short teaser ad that you could run on TikTok or Instagram Reels or whatever. But other thing I was just thinking of is a lot of times, like when you feel like you have these grand ambitions, it sometimes makes it hard to make progress, as opposed to leaning on the resources that you have readily available. And it's like an example of that would be like a few years ago, I needed to make a music video. And I was like, oh, there's a YMCA or a YWCA pool down the street. I'm just going to use that pool. It's a place I can access. You might have friends that just have some wacky interest, like knitting sweaters while on roller coasters or something. Like, well, that might not have anything to do with your music. Maybe.
Do you know someone who does that?
No, but but like, just like you're saying, lean on your friends, and maybe their interests can lead you to something that will provide compelling content in some way. So we got to lean into what we have access to as indie artists, as opposed to just kicking ourselves that we don't have $1 million. And
hey, that goes for even the non-creative or visual aspects. PR is really hard, and it's really hard to write even just like a bio for yourself. Maybe find the best writer you know, whether that's like your mom or someone else who's a really, really good writer, and sit down with them and tell them your story and see how they can help craft it. Because I know how hard it is to write about myself. I know that even though I've done this for a long time, as far as trying to self-promote, you can just sometimes get really stuck in trying to like self-promote yourself, even in terms of a bio. So just reach out to a friend, reach out to somebody who you know is really good at listening and really good at writing, and ask for help. Hannah Abraham asked, how do you go about this when you basically have no budget? Hannah, I've been there. Every album I put out has been completely self-funded. And I mean, we're talking scraping the bottom of the barrel to make it happen. Generally, it's asking for help and working out negotiations. I have a lot of friends that work for trade, but I also like to pay my collaborators, so I had to save up for that. That being said, I definitely earlier on was just like, hey, I will do this for you if you do this for me, and a lot of people were willing to help with that.
I think for me too, you got to make it either fun or something the person can feel invested in. And so creatively, sometimes that's doesn't come naturally to me, because I like to be in charge of everything. But I've noticed if I want my talented friends to help me make music, first of all, I do think it improves my music when I let other people have input, but it also makes it possible for them to buy in and be involved basically for free, because I say your input is valued and is going to shape this release and stuff. So kind of a little bit of creative trade-off might help you in that department too.
Oh yeah, and I'm going to say this real fast, but I just realized that this was a good concept. When I was putting out an album, I knew that I was going to do 3 singles in advance. And I also knew that I was going to have about 4 months of promotion, and that people were going to get sick of seeing the same visual. So what I did was I got my videographer and a photographer to go rent an Airbnb with me. And we made a music video and did a photo shoot on set. So basically we turned this Airbnb into a set, or wherever location you use, turned it into a set for a music video, but also used it as the opportunity to get all the promo photos I needed for each single. So that meant I just brought a bunch of different outfits, self-styled, and did a bunch of different looks for each single. And then also did the cover art photo shoot, did it all in one trip. So that way I'm only paying the photographer for one thing. I'm only paying the videographer for one session. They're not having to do extra work. They're doing as much work as they normally would have done, but I am capturing a bunch of different looks and a bunch of different things up front. That was also, they were like so excited to be working on something creatively, because it was like peak pandemic time. We weren't like really getting to hang out with people. So we were just like excited to work on things together. So yeah, that's a good way to save money, is to just do it all at once. But it takes a little bit of foresight with like, what do I need?
Yeah, definitely maximize people's time investment. I think we should probably run through some of the kind of like logistical things that everyone's going to want to check off the list. So once you've gotten your music finished and into distribution, meaning you've signed it up hopefully with CD Baby, and we have sent it out to streaming platforms ahead of your release date. So they've got your music and they're just sitting on it until it's time to release it. You're going to want to pitch your music to Spotify's editorial team. You do that through Spotify for Artists. You have to do it. They say 7 business days, but I would give yourself 9, 10, 11.
Weeks, yeah.
And in fact, if you actually want to have a chance at getting editorial consideration, something like closer to a month is advisable.
Do it for every single. And if you have multiple singles coming out in a period of time, that helps too. Like if you have one every other month, it sort of helps build some. I think it's an algorithm. I don't know. I'm guessing, but I think there's an algorithm that's like, oh, this is like somebody who's prolifically releasing music, so we're going to help support them.
Yeah. Well, yeah. There's like the stair stepping every release, hopefully doing this, as opposed to having a plateau or a decline in streaming engagement if you wait too long. But some other things you have done a lot of with your release about getting onto indie playlists, which took a lot of research, and then all of that playlist activity helped you get on an official Spotify playlist. So can you just kind of give the summary of your research and pitching?
Yeah, it's about knowing where you are, who you are genre-wise, and searching for playlists that are within that genre. So if you're like electronic pop, look for other playlists that are electronic pop. And you'll often find, like the big ones, like the Spotify ones, but those are really hard to contact. It's really hard to find who the editors are for those, or like there's, maybe some like company's brand playlist. If you're just starting out, I say stay away from those and look for the ones that are from like Andrew Jones is the name of the editor, and then search for Andrew Jones, that name of the playlist, on Google, and you might be able to find that person's like email address or Facebook or something, and email them or Facebook them or Instagram DM them, whatever it is. No shame. Send them a message and be like, hey, Andrew Jones, found your electronic pop album or playlist. I have a song that's electronic pop. Think you might like it. Check it out. And, 1 out of 5 times, I think that works. So that helps build, the buzz. Also, when you're putting your music out, I think generally Spotify looks at how far your reach is on the playlist. So sometimes if you're on a playlist for like that 30 people follow, that may not get picked up algorithmically as much as if you're on a playlist that like maybe 7,000 people follow. They sort of add up how many people follow all of the playlists you're on. So if you get on like 30 playlists, even if they only have like 500 followers, that can really add up, and that can sort of like put you in their better graces in the editorial tool, or like how they rank you. I hate the fact that we get ranked on this stuff. I think as artists, ranking is garbage, but it's how the monster works. So how to play the game, get on a ton of playlists, and then make sure you're using that editorial tool. Because I don't know how I got on an editorial playlist. I really didn't think I would, but it happened. So I have to think that had something to do with the fact that a bunch of other songs were placed.
Yeah, this is sort of skipping ahead in my notes, but one thing I liked that you did once your music was out, and you were getting these playlist placements, you sort of repurposed that as content, and you had like a canva.com template kind of made, right? And so anytime you get a placement or a press mention, or your friends just shared your music, or your fans were buying a vinyl album, whatever, you took all that and you kind of spruced them up in Canva, and then you could make that an Instagram story or whatever. So it was like new content. It was all interrelated with the branding. And it was kind of like a cool way of being like, look at me, see people care, but without it feeling too
It was also to say
Right.
thank you to those playlisters. Whenever someone shouts you out, whenever somebody helps you out in any way, whether they're sharing your music on Instagram in their stories or they are putting you on their playlist, like it's good to give them some thank you, even publicly. But yeah, it's also good for like again, hate the word, but it's free content. So it's okay to use sort of shameless, like, hey, I got this, like somebody wrote about me in an article and tag that publication. People are really grateful when you also shout them out for doing the thing for you. So yes, I used a Canva template that I built, and just anytime I had a new playlist, add me on there. I'd like pop that in, put in my stories, swipe up to link to the playlist, tag the playlist, and say thank you for putting me on there. And it totally worked. Shout out Canva, OMG to Jazzy. I agree.
I
love
use
it.
Canva
So
constantly.
easy.
Hannah's wondering if they should basically cold contact Spotify editors. I say no. Spotify's pitching tool in Spotify for Artists is really, they invented that so they wouldn't get thousands of emails a day that they're not going to read. So go through the official channels. However, what Cristina did of writing independent Spotify playlist curators, you could totally do that with cold contact.
Totally. It's also really, really challenging to find the emails for Spotify editors. And I'm saying this not as a musician, but even as a publicist, I've tried. It's like really challenging. You can like stalk people on Rocket Reach, or stalk them on LinkedIn and try and figure out like who's running that R&B playlist. I have no clue. So yeah. What's the normal about paying independent curators for feature? I don't. I think it's sort of trash. So don't do it unless you really, really, really think that it's worth it. I think that's a scam.
Yes.
That's my personal opinion.
Beware of paying for that stuff for sure. A couple other things that maybe we can race through here, but like if you talked about maximizing what you got out of that Airbnb rental.
Yeah.
And
shout out Airbnb. We've really promoted a lot of brands.
Other brands, I know. Yeah. I did something similar. I took a day off work and I made like 9 short promo videos but like however you can batch your work. And if you're like big on TikTok, you might already know this. Like maybe, I don't mean big on TikTok, but if you're active on TikTok, you might know that you're more effective when you just like every Sunday create a bunch of videos, as opposed to trying to make it this thing you have to attack every day. That way you can kind of save up ideas and execute them all at once when you've got your camera and your lighting and whatever set up. If you are building an ad funnel or doing some, a little bit more complex marketing using Instagram or Facebook beyond just boosting your posts, you're going to want to set that up well in advance, because if the ads need to go live on your release date, they need to be approved in advance. I run into this all the time because my music is somewhat political. Facebook constantly slaps my ads and says, this violates our guidelines. And then I have to talk to someone and say, I'm just a lowly musician. I'm not running for office. And they probably hate me, but they do resolve my issues that they're flagging my ad. But again, that's stuff I have to address all ahead of time so that the ads go live when I need them to. I would also, I think we said this, write out all your posts in advance, because you want to do posts every day for probably a week leading up to the release. And then I'd say every day for a week or two after. And when your music's out, your brain is going to be scrambled. You're going to be living your life and racing. So the more you have done in advance.
I don't know that we did say that yet, but one way to go about that is just to create like a month-long this word makes me cringe, content calendar, where you have like almost an entire month, if not longer, sort of planned out. And you're like, okay, on October 1st, I'm going to mention that on November 1st, I have a single coming out. And then 4 days after that, I'm going to share like the first tiny little bit of a visual teaser. These are the platforms I'm going to put it on. Here's the image. I already got it because I already made it 3 months ago. And then, every single thing that you might possibly need to post leading up to it. It also helps you sort of like keep your sanity. I've said this so many times, but I feel like being in social media during this period of time is going to drive you crazy if you're relying on it for any sort of validation. So try to keep your head out of like the social media game and use it as a tool. Don't think of it as like yeah, but nobody's liking it. Who cares? Just use it as an opportunity to spread the message and to put that information out there. And the best way to do that is to schedule posts. You can use tools like Monday or later Buffer to do that. But try and keep your head out of like well, how many views did I get on this video? And plan more in advance so that your brain doesn't need to be like on, social media every single day, engaging,
Yeah. You're reminding me of a story recently. So like how content performs is definitely dependent on the platform. So what happened, I made this video. It was a lyric video where I actually took a Wikipedia page and I got the code and I redid the code so that my lyrics were the Wikipedia entry. And I thought, oh, this is so clever. It ties into the history I'm talking about in this song. I'm a total genius. I was convinced everyone would love it. I put it on IGTV and no one liked it.
Yeah.
No one. And I was like, oh, I'm an idiot. I've made a fool of myself. What did I do? And I was like, no, I like this video. I don't care. I'm going to share it on Facebook. And when I put it on Facebook, I wouldn't say it like went bonkers or anything, but way more people were engaged and liked it. And I said, oh, that's because on IGTV, the text is tiny. It was the wrong place to put that video. When I put it on a better platform, it did closer to what I wanted it to do.
Also, audiences behave differently on different platforms. Like on Facebook, you might just be your like parents and your grandparents, but they're like really excited anytime you post. So they're going to comment, they're going to share it. That's like a great tool to use if you want people to like really support you on a wide network. And then there's, Instagrams, like people are generally, they're going to show their support by me sharing it on their stories or, I found that there are people that will just like share it on their stories, but they don't tag me or like it. And so I'll never know. And then I'll be going through stories and be like, oh, hey, that's me. And then I'm like,
why didn't they tag me?
Well, if they had tagged me, I could have shared this.
That's a good point, though. Your fans don't know what to do to help you. So you have to tell them.
You have to like lay it out for them.
It helps me on Spotify when you add my song to one of your playlists, or it helps me when you're sharing.
Or tell them why to pre-save it.
Yeah.
Sometimes people don't get that pre-saving helps you out. It helps your numbers or whatever. Like I literally in a post was like, here's a pre-save link and here's why pre-saving is helpful for artists. And that like got way more people to pre-save it because now they understand the whole point of it. A lot of people are like, what's the point? I'm just going to go on release day and go listen to it. So spell it out. It's also, again, free. It's a free form of marketing if you're sort of like educating your audience in a friendly and like collaborative way by being like, hey, I love that you're a fan. Here's how you can help.
I think we should leave some time for questions, but one thing I wanted to say before we end is that like before a release, everyone is stressed. There's, like I said, there's so much to do. You're not going to get it all done. Then you put all this effort in. The release comes out, and chances are, if you're ambitious and you have big dreams, it's not going to do what you want it to do. You're going to be disappointed, right? And so it'll feel somewhat deflating, and you'll kick yourself. But all this to say, I'm trying to lead to a hopeful thing. Not everything rides on what happens in the first week of your release, because there are billions of people out there in the world who've never heard your music, and your release could be 5 years old. And as long as you're finding new creative ways of sharing it with people, actually, you don't even need new ways of sharing it with total strangers. You can just take what worked best from everything you've tried and put that in front of strangers. But even for your existing audience, as long as you're coming up with new ways of talking about the music, new context to share it, it's never going to get old. So don't be afraid if your dreams don't come true once your release is out. Just keep trying.
Absolutely. Should we open this up for questions?
I think so.
All right, hit us. 1, 2, 3, go.
I saw someone talking about merch, and I would say if you're going to do merch, and particularly if you're printing vinyl or CDs, that needs to start way ahead of 45 days because vinyl pressing is backed up a lot. you're going to need a lot more artwork than simply just a digital cover file.
Yeah, definitely talk to manufacturers and ask what their timelines are, because I think vinyl is like months and months and months right now. Sometimes, like for me, it was 4 months, and that was a sort of normal speed. And I think it might be even more backed out. So some people aren't getting it for like 8, 9 months. So that's where you need to have your stuff. What's the best way to test if a song is truly mastered?
Test if it's mastered.
Well, you should know if you did send it to a mastering engineer, but also, Chris, how would you answer that question?
You'll know it's mastered when you're super stressed out and you can't tell which version is better, the original mixes or the master. And then you'll have your mastering engineer do another version, and then you'll be stressed about which is better. So if you're really stressed, you know it's been mastered. No, that's totally unhelpful.
Test it out on as many different types of speakers as well. Make sure that it sounds good on everything from the fancy speakers in your studio, your headphones, and phone in a cup, which I hate, but that's another story.
One other thing about mastering is if you're using a human mastering engineer for a big release like an album, which I advise, that's going to take a while. You know, you got to work with their schedule. You want to leave in a few weeks of potential revisions if they don't deliver what you want first time around. But not every song, if you're doing singles, needs to have a human involved. So there's Cloud Bounce, which is an automated mastering service you can use through CD Baby's dashboard. And sometimes for a single, it's just better to just quickly get it done, put it out.
You know how I feel about that. The AIs, they're taking over.
They're taking over everything.
Let's see. Somebody was asking questions about crowdfunding, GoFundMe, Kickstarter. I've personally never used any of those. Have you, Chris?
Well, I used Pledge Music back when that was a thing. I had a fine experience, except that it was it's a lot of work, and even though I don't know, I recorded a podcast like a year or two ago pronouncing crowdfunding dead.
Did you? That's a strong choice.
Yeah, I don't know. It just feels like it takes a lot of, how do I say this diplomatically? It takes a lot to grab people's attention these days. And when you get their attention is what's going to interest them most in order to keep their attention. Hey, can you pay me some money so I can do this thing?
There are other ways to ask for support from your community. And I think one thing that we're talking about here with this blueprint is sort of how can you ask for active support by listening or sharing or helping promote your music, and find other ways to sort of fund it independently. I know that's really challenging. Again, I've put out 2 albums all from scratch. I had to work multiple jobs to do that and to save that money. And it wasn't like I don't have just like a built-in savings account. I'm just being really transparent here about money. So I had to like really, really like scratch away to find even just like to get something to put out these albums. But I found that it was a little more easy if I gave myself a ton of time up front and sort of just like did things over time.
Well, that's where setting a number one priority for your release helps too, because if you only have whatever you've been able to save working a second job, you got to spend that in the right place.
Or save money from shows. I mean, like I have a fund because anytime I played a show, I didn't spend that money on food afterwards. I put it all into a savings account, and we're talking like maybe 5 years worth of shows, and in a city that didn't pay well enough for shows. And so I would just like, and after paying my band, like, you know, maybe I've got $20, but that $20 really like built up over time. So thinking of ways that you can sort of fund it yourself, so that then what all you're asking of your network and of your family and of your friends and of your fans is to support you on release day or after. I'm always hungry after gigs too. There's nothing I love more than like the Venue burger at 3 a.m. Bar, Mississippi Studios in Portland, Oregon. Best burger. Will this video be available to view at a later time?
I don't know.
I'm not sure.
Maybe Benjamin knows?
Maybe Benjamin knows. Ben, let us know in the chat. Does anybody have any other questions? I'm going to go backwards. Trading. Yeah, somebody was talking about trading resources like writing a bio and blah, blah. Again, I think that that's the best way. How far apart should you space out release dates? Oh, that's a really, really great question. It really depends on what the end goal is. So if it's like an album and you've got maybe 2 singles, 3 singles, I did it this last time where I was like, I did a waterfall release, which really quickly is when you release 1 single, and then when you release the second one, you also include the first one. And when you release the third one, you include the second and the first one, all as like sort of a mini EP. So that way, when somebody listens to the third single, they also see the other 2. I did that a month apart for each one. And one thing I noticed was that I felt like it was a little too much too soon. I would probably in the future give myself more time, like either a month and a half between, or maybe even 2 months between, because you're still like promoting one when you're ready to start promoting the next one, because there's always like post-release promotion. So I personally think a month and a half, 2 months is a good amount of time between each single. Yeah, that's my personal belief.
That sounds sane in terms of, especially if you're giving yourself all that time to make video assets.
Totally.
If you're doing the full thing for every release, then that seems sane.
And
I know people who've had a lot of success doing every 2 weeks. And
yeah, which
I can't
amazing.
wrap my head around that productivity for one hand.
I don't get it.
But
also, like, if I'm releasing a single and I know I have a music video ready for that single, I'll probably release the music video a week after the single comes out, because it's another opportunity to bring people back to listen to my single. So finding opportunities for traffic post-release. In other words, there are probably people that on the week that you put out the music video have still never listened to the single, and now they're going to see the music video and they're going to be like, oh right, I need to go listen to that single, and they're going to go to whatever platform and listen to it, and not just watch the video. So,
and that speaks to the rule of 7, which is a marketing principle that in order for anyone to ever take the action you want them to, they have to be told 7 times.
I love that.
In order for them to notice, care enough, and then literally find a window of time where it's possible for them to do the thing, because they might be checking their phone, but they're feeding their kids and they can't stream your song right then. So don't be afraid to just keep the message going. One question.
Yeah, you go.
Oh, one question I like is the best way to increase your follower base on social to share your music releases with the most amount of people. So what I have found effective for me is to come up with a music video that has something bizarre that happens within the first few seconds to grab people's attention, spend some money to target total strangers using lookalike, or not lookalike audiences, but sort of sounds like artists in the targeting, putting that video on Facebook and Instagram, and then asking them to do nothing. So it doesn't look like an ad. It's just a video with a little caption. And then based on the people who have watched 75% of that video, I take that group of people and I create a lookalike audience to help me find more people who are going to like that video. Once that pool of people who've enjoyed the video enough to watch 75% of it, I then serve them an ad and say, hey, stream it on Spotify, or sign up for this cool experience, or whatever it is, buy the record. But you want to kind of get rid of everyone who's disinterested, pay money up front to reach people just with something they're going to like or not like. And then based on how much they like it, you pay money to actually ask those people to do something. And I'm sure that's a whole course you could take in Facebook advertising, but
yeah, that's definitely more in depth than I've gotten with it. But I should say this for anybody that doesn't know, Chris co-runs the DIY Musician podcast and the DIY Musician blog. All of those are on DIYmusician.com, I believe, and those are incredible resources. Anything you can possibly think of, from Tatiana's question about how can we explain Spotify playlists in depth? I don't think we have enough time to explain them in depth, but you can go to the blog or you can listen to the podcast. I think you're at like what episode of the podcast now? Like 400 or something?
We haven't hit 300 yet, but we're close.
Okay. Still, it's been years and years in the making, and it's evolved over time. It's Chris Robley and Kevin Bruner of CD Baby. The blog is incredible.
A recent participant as well.
I have been there. But the blog is also incredible because there's articles that date back to like 2010 that are super resourceful even today. Like you'd think, well, this wouldn't apply today. And actually it totally does. Like how to get people to buy merch at the end of your show, like those sorts of things, all the way down to how do Spotify algorithms work. So check out DIYmusician.com for a lot of answers to these questions.
I was just real quick for Hannah's question about Instagram. You're going to have a lot more targeting capabilities if you're using Facebook's ad manager, as opposed to like the promote or boost function that you just have on the Instagram app.
Yeah.
So if you're using Facebook ads manager, you will be able to sort of include and exclude a whole bunch of stuff to get strangers.
I don't know exactly the point of entry for this Spotify playlists in-depth question, but if you're referring to sort of like the point of them, or like, yeah, I don't really know how to answer this question, but I think one thing to note with Spotify playlists is a lot of times the people that are listening are passive listeners. That means that they're not necessarily listening to it because they want to know exactly every single artist on this playlist. They're listening to it because they're working from home or they're like fixing their car or something and it's playing in the background. And so you're going to get a listener from it, but it's not necessarily somebody who's going to then like follow you and like maybe one time out of 10 will you get that new fan, that new follower. But it's more so that you're building sort of like a rapport on Spotify, and also so that on your Spotify page, it shows all of the playlists that you might have been discovered on. I really like the discovered on section of the Spotify profile, because what that means is somebody did find you on a playlist and liked the song enough to click through, and now you're showing up in there. They're following you now because of it.
Yeah, and this could be a whole other conversation. I know how important Spotify is in terms of the industry, but at a low level for indie artists, DIY artists, it can sometimes take our eyes off of actions that would help us make true fans.
Yes.
And we neglect email. We neglect collecting someone's phone number for an SMS list. We neglect
playing shows
or trying to sell them a cool experience or album, because our eyes are on how many streams do we have on Spotify. And yes, at a higher level, that stuff is important. But at a starting off level, you want to make sure that you're making an actual connection and not just worrying about passive streams like Cristina was saying.
Here's one thing I'll say. I put out an album in May. We're at that point still not playing shows. I'm somebody who really loves to connect with my fans in person. I love meeting people after a show. I will go shake people's hands. I will go, sign stuff and have those connections. I also love being on stage and feeling like an audience. And I didn't get to do that with this release. And I was really bummed. And I sort of felt this like mild postpartum depression because, which I hope is not insensitive to say. I haven't had a kid. Because I felt like I was just relying on the internet for any feedback from it. And that meant like I started looking at the numbers more, and I started looking at social media, or like checking my email and that sort of thing, or checking texts from friends and seeing if they had anything nice to say about it. And I don't think that that's really healthy for us as artists. And I think that one way that we can sort of go around that is, again, to just sort of like do everything we can to have all of this stuff to promote it up front, so that then we can sort of take a step back after it's out, continue to sort of like post promote it, but take a step back and remember, this is art. I'm putting this out into the universe. It's in the hands of the universe. When you're on stage, you're not like, did everyone like it? Did everyone like it? Did everyone like it? You're just on stage, present, and you're just like grateful for that like sort of ephemeral moment. So sort of treating your digital release or as that as well.
And give yourself time to reply to everyone who comments and everyone who writes back for an email, because I know sometimes you think like, I don't have time for that. Like I just want them to like me, but I don't want to be.
They took the time.
I don't want to be responsible to them. That is what we wanted when we asked to have listeners and fans, is that connection. So don't neglect those people. They're more important than literally anyone else you could ever reach, because they're already your fan. So keep them.
Just like you wouldn't neglect them if they walked up to you at a show and said, great job. You wouldn't just walk right past them. So appreciate the respect and the affection that you do get from people, but then don't feel terrible from the people you didn't get it from. You know what I mean? It's a good life lesson in general.
I have another session I'm supposed to be doing in 3 minutes, so we should probably go. But before we do, we should remind everyone to use the release plan generator, which you can find at release.cdbaby.com. And that'll give you, a kind of reverse engineered timeline leading up to your release date. It won't have everything we discussed here. It'll have a lot of the kind of deadlines and items that are tied in with your distribution. So check that out.
Thank you for everything and everybody for being here. It was really nice to do this.
Yeah, this was fun. See y'all.
All right, bye.
So gone, you're under my skin. I'm losing.